When my father handed me a check for $500 on the morning of my major spinal surgery, he didn't look me in the eye. He told me he couldn't be at the hospital because my younger brother's tech startup launch party was an event the family simply couldn't miss. I was left completely alone in that sterile room, facing a high-risk operation with no one to hold my hand. But while my family was busy drinking champagne and celebrating my brother's success, a stranger was standing outside my ICU door. For 7 days, while I drifted in and out of consciousness, this mystery man visited every single night, quietly paying off my entire medical bill and leaving behind a leather-bound journal. When the head nurse finally showed me the security footage of his face, my breath hitched because the man standing in that frame was someone my father had spent 20 years trying to erase. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Clara Vance. I'm 32 years old, and until the day of my surgery, I believed loyalty to family was absolute. I had spent months dealing with excruciating back pain, barely able to walk, until the doctors told me I needed an immediate, high-risk spinal fusion. The surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, a day that should have had my family standing by my bed, holding my hand. Instead, my father stood by the hospital door, checking his gold watch with an air of complete indifference. He tossed an envelope containing a $500 check onto my bedside table. "Clara, you know how important today is for Julian," he said smoothly, referring to my 26-year-old brother. "It's the launch party for his tech startup. Every major investor in the city is going to be there. The family simply cannot miss it." Julian stood behind him, smirking quietly while adjusting his tailored suit jacket. He didn't even ask how I was feeling. To them, my life-threatening procedure was nothing more than an inconvenient scheduling conflict that threatened to pull attention away from Julian's big moment. "Dad, the surgeon said there's a risk of paralysis," I whispered, my voice trembling as tears welled in my eyes. "I just need someone here when I wake up." My father sighed, as if my fear was a burden he shouldn't have to carry. "Don't be dramatic, Clara. You're a grown woman. The doctors know what they're doing." Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked out, Julian following closely behind. An hour later, the orderly arrived to push my gurney down the long, fluorescent-lit hallway. There was no family to squeeze my hand, no loved ones offering prayers or quiet words of encouragement. The heavy double doors of the operating theater swung open, and as the cold air hit my face, I was completely, utterly alone. When I finally opened my eyes, the world was a blur of dull yellow fluorescent light and the rhythmic, hollow beep of the heart monitor. The anesthesia felt like wet cement in my lungs, and every tiny twitch in my back radiated sharp, agonizing heat. I forced my head to turn toward the small plastic chair beside my bed, clinging to a foolish, desperate hope that maybe my father or Julian had felt a pang of guilt and shown up while I was under. The chair was empty. No flowers, no card, no familiar face. My phone on the bedside table sat completely dark, not a single text or missed call from either of them. Over the next 3 days, as I drifted between feverish sleep and intense physical therapy, the silence from my family was deafening. I was completely on my own, abandoned in a sterile room to process the crushing weight of their indifference. Or so I thought. On the morning of the 4th day, a senior nurse named Elena came in to change my foreline. She glanced at the nightstand, where a fresh bouquet of white lilies sat in a glass vase, casting a soft, sweet fragrance across the room. "Your gentleman friend has exquisite taste," Elena said with a warm, gentle smile as she adjusted the drip. I frowned, my throat dry. "What gentleman? My family hasn't been here." Elena paused, looking at me with genuine surprise. "Not your family. The man who comes every night after visiting hours end. He's been here every single evening since your surgery. He stands right outside your door, asks the head nurse for a detailed update on your vitals and pain levels, and stays for nearly an hour just watching through the glass to make sure you're resting peacefully." My heart did a strange, erratic flutter. I don't know anyone like that." "What does he look like?" "Tall, broad shoulders, dark coat," she recalled softly. He never comes inside because he says he doesn't want to wake you. Oh, and he settled the outstanding hospital balance yesterday morning. I stared at her, completely stunned. My medical debt was over $40,000 after insurance. He paid my bill. Elena nodded, pulling a small, heavy object wrapped in dark brown leather from her pocket and placing it on my tray table. He left this for you last night. He said you'd know what to do with it when the time was right. It was an antique, leather-bound journal, secured with a heavy brass combination lock. I stared at the heavy brass lock on the leather-bound journal, my mind racing through every combination I could think of. Birthdays, anniversaries, house numbers, nothing worked. The mystery of who was standing outside my door every night, paying off a $40,000 medical bill, was driving me insane. By the morning of day 7, the physical pain in my spine had dulled to a manageable ache, but the suspense was overwhelming. I was scheduled to be discharged in 2 hours, and I knew I couldn't leave this hospital without knowing the truth. When Elena came in with my final vitals check, I grabbed her arm. "Elena, please," I begged, my voice trembling. "I can't open this journal, and my family still hasn't called me. I need to know who he is. Is there any way I can see the security footage from outside my room?" Elena hesitated, looking toward the hallway, before her face softened with empathy. "Technically, it's against protocol, but seeing how your father and brother treated you, you deserve some answers." She slipped out of the room and returned 10 minutes later carrying a portable tablet from the security station. She tapped the screen, loading the night vision footage from the hallway camera directly above my door. The timestamp read 11:42 p.m. on the night of my surgery. A tall man in a dark, tailored trench coat walked into the frame. He stopped just outside my door, leaning his forehead against the glass window. His shoulders rose and fell with heavy, silent sighs as he watched me sleep. Every few minutes, he would flag down a passing nurse, pointing toward my monitors, clearly demanding updates on my oxygen and heart rate. He stayed there for over an hour, a lone sentinel watching over me in the dark. "Freeze it right there," I whispered, my heart slamming against my ribs. Elena paused the video just as the man turned toward the camera under the bright hallway lights. The image sharpened, revealing strong jawline features, striking blue eyes, and silvering hair at his temples. My breath hitched in my throat. I froze. "It can't be," I murmured, tears instantly blurring my vision. It was Arthur Sterling, the man my father had branded a traitor, a thief, and a monster for the last 20 years. According to my father, Arthur was the business partner who had embezzled millions from their joint firm, ruined our family's original fortune, and vanished into thin air when I was just 12 years old. Hands shaking violently, I grabbed the locked journal. Arthur's old corporate office number had been 0814, the date his sister passed away. I dialed the 4 digits into the brass lock. Click. The lock snapped open. Inside lay thick pages covered in dense handwriting, along with original bank audit records, contract copies, and wire transfer receipts that completely rewrote my entire childhood. My hands trembled as I turned the yellowed pages of the journal, my eyes devouring every word. The bank audit records and wire transfers attached to the back painted a horrifying, undeniable picture. Arthur Sterling hadn't stolen a single penny. It was my father who had embezzled millions from their shared company 20 years ago. When the board began asking questions, my father framed Arthur, ruining his reputation and driving him out of the city. My father then used that stolen fortune to fund Julian's lavish lifestyle, private schools, and seed capital for his tech startup, while forcing me to live under constant financial strain, convincing me we were barely getting by. Arthur wasn't a traitor. He was my late mother's brother, my biological uncle, whom my father had systematically cut out of my life to keep the stolen fortune for himself. Arthur had spent the last 2 decades building a quiet, legitimate empire elsewhere, waiting for the right moment to uncover the truth and protect me from the rot of my father's greed. An hour later, the heavy wooden door to my hospital room swung open. My father and Julian walked in, carrying coffee cups and chatting casually about the launch party's press coverage. They looked at me as if they expected me to smile, to offer a dutiful greeting after 7 days of utter abandonment. "Well, Clara," my father said lightly, adjusting his designer tie. "The doctor says you're being discharged today. Good to see you made it through without any complications. You ready to head home?" I sat upright in the bed, my spine stiff, staring at him with a coldness that made his smile falter. "How was Julian's launch party, Dad? Was it worth leaving your daughter alone for a major spinal surgery?" Julian rolled his eyes, taking a sip of his coffee. "Oh, come on, Clara. Don't start with the dramatic guilt trip. You had nurses taking care of you." "Nurses didn't pay my $40,000 medical bill, Julian," I said softly, my voice dripping with icy precision. "And neither did you, Dad." I pulled the thick stack of bank audit records and wire transfer receipts from the journal and threw them onto the tray table between us. "Arthur Sterling paid it," I said, watching the color drain completely from my father's face. "And he left me the paper trail that shows exactly where you got the money for Julian's startup." The look of absolute terror on my father's face was a revelation. Julian tried to grab the documents from the table, but my father's hand froze midair, trembling as he recognized the official forensic accounting seal at the top of the pages. He knew the game was over. The paper trail proved that every cent of Julian's startup capital was tied directly to historic embezzlement and fraud. Within weeks, the financial audit Arthur provided triggered a sweeping investigation. Julian's investors pulled out immediately, causing his company to collapse before it even launched, and my father was forced to face the legal and financial reckonings he had dodged for 20 years. The day after I was discharged, I met Arthur at a quiet cafe overlooking the ocean. Seeing him in person, not through a grainy security monitor, but sitting across from me with tears in his eyes, he didn't look like the villain my father had painted. He was a loving uncle who had been stripped of his family, waiting patiently in the shadows until he could rescue me from their net of lies. He held my hand, apologizing for not being able to step in sooner, but assuring me that I would never have to face life alone again. With Arthur's support and my own determination, I focused on my recovery, both physically and emotionally. I cut off all contact with my father and brother, leaving behind their toxic web of manipulation for good. Today, my spine is fully healed, and I am finally living a life built on truth, genuine love, and independence. Blood doesn't make a family, loyalty, love, and showing up when it matters most do. What would you have done if you found out your whole life was built on a lie like this? Comment your thoughts below. And if this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more powerful stories. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.